This is where I was actually blown away by Ather.
They're getting like 3,000 likes on a single post on the community.
The competition of Ather or Ola is not with each other.
I didn't get my RC for 9 months.
What? That got me really confused. Why are these guys spending so much money, so much time in actually solving a problem that none of the competitors have solved?
One of the secret tactics that the companies employ, that is, differentiating them from competitors. This startup has been one of the most requested startups on the Perspective community, and with the IPO of it coming right around the corner, we thought it was the perfect time to talk about this company. We're referring to none other than Ather. And in this episode, we will be talking about three things. First, the EV two-wheeler market in India. Second, the unbeatable product and distribution strategy of Ather. And third, a very secret tactic that is driving a lot of their growth and differentiating them from most of the competitors in the market. So stay tuned and let's perspectivify the shit out of this.
Before we get into the EV two-wheeler market segment in India, what we really need to understand is what is the two-wheeler segment in India on an overall level. So here are some numbers. 70% of all registered vehicles in India are actually two-wheelers. In India, the two-wheeler segment accounts for almost 50% of all petrol transactions. But this is where things are changing in the two-wheeler segment. According to a McKinsey report, by 2030, electric two-wheelers are expected to account for 60 to 70% of all new two-wheeler sales in India. But if you look at the present EV two-wheeler market, in FY 2024, it hit a record of selling 944,000 units on a total market level. And this was driven by significant growth from players like Ola Electric, TVS, and of course, Ather Energy. So just to give you the breakdown of this 944,000 units by player wise, Ola has 35% market share in the EV two-wheeler market, followed by TVS, which has 19.37%, and Ather has 11.53%. Here's why I differ from most people who essentially talk about how Ather is losing in this market. The reality is that if we look at the overall EV market, it is just 8 to 9% of the total two-wheeler market, which essentially means that the competition of Ather or Ola is not with each other, but it's with these huge players like Honda, Activa, Bajaj, etc. Right? Which is why when we spoke to people from Ather, what we realized was Ather doesn't really care if Ola or even TVS beats them in the short term, because they know for a fact that with the right long-term strategy and the right product, they can not only be the biggest player in the EV two-wheeler segment, but they can become the biggest two-wheeler company in India.
So Rakshit, an interesting thing to note here, and for the listeners who are also wondering how, Ola actually came as a late entrant into this market and actually still captured like one of the largest market shares. Like 34% market share is like not a joke in any way, right? Because they were very invested in aggressive marketing. Right, but on the other hand, why we still believe in the whole Ather concept is because of how invested their founding team as well as their other team members were invested in R&D and product innovation. And I think this is like the perfect segue to jump into the whole products side of strategy.
Yeah, absolutely. When I think about Ather's product strategy, I actually don't think about it in terms of just this scooter, but it's actually consisting of three things. The first is, of course, the scooter and the Ather OS. The second is actually distribution of how they're selling the Ather scooter. And the third is their after-sales service. So let us discuss each of these three things in detail now. When we first look at the physical scooter and their OS, what we need to understand is that this product is designed, manufactured, and assembled in India. I don't know if you know this, but Ola Electric was actually purchased by Bhavish Agarwal initially from a Netherlands company. And it was not actually designed in India. Of course, they've done a lot of iterations over a long period of time. But Ather, on the other hand, from 2014 to 2018, they were doing the grunt work of actually not only designing the scooter, but also manufacturing it. And the reason why they took so long to basically release their product is number one, in 2014, nobody was building hardware companies in India in 2014. So there was no ecosystem around it. Second was that the reason why they chose to do this and not, let's say, go to a China and just import a scooter and start selling it was because Indian conditions are very different. So if you just import it from outside, what happens is that when you scale up production, when you scale up all of these things, if the scooter is not suited to Indian conditions, it can actually be disastrous. And because of the long effort that they spent on the R&D of this vehicle, is the reason why you don't see their scooters catching fire. Now, what you need to understand about Ather is that they've been at it for a long period of time. They've designed, manufactured, and assembled two-wheelers in India. But to give you, but the reason why it took them so long, which is 4 years to launch their first product, was because first of all there was no ecosystem in 2014 related to hardware startups in India, and the second was that they realized early on that Indian conditions are very different. So if you just import it from outside, there is a chance that that strategy might not work over a long period of time.
And I think I remember seeing an ad also about this where they actually branded about how, electric, sort of engines don't burst because of, let's say, heat conditions. I think this is a very common, sort of worry among a lot of the Indian population, which is why they've stayed away from EVs because of the potential possibility of, mini explosions of sort, right? I think it's happened here and there. Right, and I think obviously, Rakshit, it doesn't make sense to only cover R&D, but also the fact that these guys are immensely invested in their design side of things, right? And I mean, insanely invested in design, right? To the point where I think one of the mantras of their team, which I read online, was that don't give stepmotherly treatment to any feature on, the scooter, right? So basically, treat each and every feature on the scooter in a manner that it gets the best attention, right? And another very interesting thing on talking to someone from the Ather team, which we realized is that they're not just invested in providing features that get the best marketing, the best PR online, right? We have so many brands these days just adding a new feature. Ki yaar, LinkedIn page is going to go, viral, right? Or Twitter page is going to go viral. But these guys are actually invested in solving real consumer pain points. And personally, having a two-wheeler of my own, I actually admit the fact that there are so many pain points that I inherently don't realize. For example, right, there is the pain point of, let's say, when you're opening the dicky of the scooter, right? You have to hold it up. And to put stuff in, right? So you have to constantly hold it up, right? That's one pain point. I know the pain point is, let's say, when people are sitting, behind, on the scooter, like probably me or the driver, right? It's very uncomfortable to sit on the backside, right? Like the kind of the kind of ledge that you provided to hold on to, or like the kind of backrest. There's no backrest, for instance, right? Now, Ather has actually solved these, in real time level, right? Now, for example, they actually solve the problem of storage, the holding up the seat, right? So if you hold up the seat, it automatically is stationary, right? So you don't need to hold it up forcefully, right? Very, very interesting, right? Even one more thing that a lot of people face when they're adjusting the rear view mirrors on the scooters is that you can't actually adjust a lot of the angle, right? You can adjust the mirror itself a bit, but not the angle, right? So they've also provided this option in their, Ather products, right? And even lastly, right, so they've also split their scooters into two varieties. One would be the performance kind, which are more oriented towards, high performance, high speed, larger engines, right? And then they have the family scooters, right, which they have introduced this product called Rishta, right? Wherein it's more focused on having more space, more leg room. So anybody who's probably riding with their family, it's a lot more comfortable. To the point that they've actually introduced a back, like a mini backrest on the back of the scooter.
That's amazing.
We'll probably put up a screen grab just to show that. That is insane product innovation. Like they have actually found these pain points, which it's not just that consumers, like you're not selling a feature that is non-existent. You are giving a feature that people actually face, like a problem that people actually face, right? And I found that immensely interesting, right?
Yeah.
And adding on to that, the last thing, right, is that they also have their own OS systems, right? Now you could think of it this way, right? Now I don't know how much of an Apple user you are, but very recently I've become like a big time Apple user myself, and I've sort of realized the kind of perks of having like an ecosystem, right? Like, okay, AirPods automatically, connect to your iPhone. You can seamlessly switch between devices, and I think that's what Ather is also aspiring to do, wherein they're actually having their own OS, right? So you get continuous updates on your app. You have like a dedicated app for Ather, as well as the system of the scooter itself, right? So you can so you constantly get a lot of new features, a lot of new updates, right? And I think they are sort of building an Apple of it, of themselves, and we'll probably come to more of that in the later sections.
So I think that's a very interesting point that you made, and a very interesting comparison. I think one thing that people don't realize with software updates is that this actually helps you engage with existing customers as well, right? So when you have this big launch where you're talking about let's say a new feature or a couple of new things that you've added in the Ather OS, that essentially brings in the existing users to watch this is the upgrade that I'm going to get in my future, and in the future, and how this is going to impact my life today, even though I might have purchased this product 2 years back, but it just helps Ather stay on top of the mind of the consumer always. Now let's move on to the second part of their product strategy, which is their distribution. If we go back a couple of years, when Ather started, they actually did not have any offline stores like a normal automobile company. You would have to purchase it online, and of course there were options to essentially do a test drive and all of those things, but they were still primarily online. But in the last couple of years, they've actually started building their offline distribution to a quite extent. Just to give you some numbers, they are currently in approximately 164 cities, and they have 227 showrooms as of September 24, right? The reason why they've scaled this up to such a large extent over such a short period of time is because they realized that if 10 people were doing a test drive with Ather, 7 of them ended up purchasing it. Think about it.
Wow.
Like 70% sales conversion rate. Like that's unheard of, right? So the idea was simple, that let's open up a shop, an Ather shop in all the major towns, all the major cities,
of course,
and let's get as many people to just try out the product, because we believe in the product so much, and the product is like so much better than the alternatives out there, that you'll end up purchasing it. Like 7 out of 10 people will end up purchasing it. So math made sense for them, right?
I think that's why when we were speaking to someone from their team, they were so convinced on telling us ki yaar, go and check it out at the showroom and you will see the difference, right? I'm going to have to wait on that decision because I don't have the budget to buy this product at this point in time. So, now, out of these 164 cities, they have further bifurcated their strategy into 2 segments. Now, I briefly mentioned this previously, but they also have 2 variants of scooters. One being the family scooter, which is called the Rishta product, and one being the performance scooter, which is essentially variants of the Ather 450. Right? Now, interesting thing to note here is that not every scooter is highly applicable in every type of region in India. For example, let's say if I'm staying in a state in northeastern side of the country, right? Now these are essentially regions where the terrain is extremely hilly, right? So you have a lot of hills in the region, which makes the climb, the slopes a lot more difficult to sort of drive the scooter on, which is why in hilly regions especially, right? So you have northeastern, some parts of the south like Kerala, Karnataka, right? You need scooters which have much more horsepower, much larger engines to essentially make the climb, right? Which is why performance scooters actually make a lot more sense to be marketed heavily in these particular regions where there are more difficult terrains, right?
Yeah.
And across central India, where there's more of plateau regions, right? Not a lot of hilly ground. You can obviously operate the family scooters much more, right? So that's how they're potentially approaching their strategy of experimenting more with the performance variants in the hilly regions, and then focusing more on the family scooters in the plateau regions.
Very interesting.
Not only that, Rakshit, even while reading through some of their IPO filing documents, it was clearly mentioned that they are also planning to expand abroad, which adds to their sort of growth, plans domestically and internationally. And they're applying the same exact logic that I just discussed in their, international expansion. Now, what you have to understand is that they're also, while venturing into the international markets, it's very experimental for them, right? They're not like 100% sure that this is going to be short success. And so what they have essentially done is that they have planned to expand into two major countries, which is Nepal and Sri Lanka, right? And these countries, if you really think about it, make really a lot of sense. And I'll also tell you why. Now, obviously, one is the fact that they are in close proximity to India. So logistically, it's much easier to, sort of send across the scooters. But another interesting thing is that based on their variants, right, as I said, it's very experimental for them. So now they want, two markets where they can experiment with both of these products and see what's clicking, right? So for example, Nepal again is a hilly region. So becomes a perfect market to test their performance scooters. And this is also a market where two-wheelers are heavily in demand, but there's not a lot of penetration by, big players, right? Secondly, in the case of Sri Lanka, right, again, a perfect market where penetration is low, two-wheeler demand is high, and Ather gets to test their family variant because of the sort of plateauic region, right? So makes perfect sense to experiment with both products independently in markets where, they actually make a lot of sense, to sort of capture.
The whole international strategy makes a lot of sense for Ather, because if you really think about it, Ather is already in like 164 cities in India. If it, let's say, doubles the city to 300, right, and they can do that in the next 1.5 years, what do you do after that? Because going from 300 cities to 600 cities will actually be diminishing returns. It won't 2x your sales from there on, because not everyone in India can actually afford a 1,60,000 scooter. And with Ather and generally EV two-wheeler companies in India having the best technology, they can actually go and explore all of these markets and see where do they find product market fit. Lastly, in the product segment, what we want to talk about is their after sales service, and this is where I was actually blown away by Ather, right?
Same.
So generally, the experience that I have had with my car is that the salespeople will tell you all kinds of stuff before selling you the product about how great this product is, but nobody wants to talk about after sales service because I mean, they don't have an incentive to really give you the best service, right? But
just to the point that when I bought my scooter, I didn't get my RC for 9 months.
What?
Okay. I didn't get my RC for 9 months because I kept calling the showroom. I'm like, guys, so when does this get delivered? They're just like, it'll come to your place at some point in time.
Holy shit.
What kind of service is this in India?
Yeah.
Right? So
crazy. So that is definitely, and I can say this on record, that this is definitely not the case with Ather, right? Ather provides pick and drop. Ather provides roadside assistance through their app. You don't have to call anything. You can just go to their app, book a roadside assistance. and you get actual status updates of what they're doing to your scooter in real time in the showroom, right? Which is insane to think about. They to the point where if you're buying a second-hand two-wheeler, they've even solved that problem. So, matlab, I don't know if you know this, but let's say I get a second-hand Ather scooter from you. I can actually see how you have treated your Ather scooter over the years. How many services have you done? What kind of parts have changed, etc., etc. Which is just insane when you think about the quality of service that they're able to provide. But that got me like really confused. Why are these guys spending so much money, so much time in actually solving a problem that none of the competitors have solved, and customers are okay with that experience? So what I found out was that there were two reasons why they were essentially doing that. The first was that with their product as well, like we saw, that they want to solve those small things that nobody is really solving for, because when you do that, when you do these small things, there is a compounding effect that your overall experience with these small adjustments, your overall experience becomes far better than your competitor. And the second reason for that was something that essentially just blew my mind away, and that was because they have a very active community. They've built an in-house Reddit kind of a sort for everyone who is either going to own an Ather scooter or already owns an Ather scooter.
Yeah, let's talk about this, right? Because this is one of the more interesting aspects, and like we said initially, one of the secret tactics that the company is employing, that is, differentiating them from competitors, right? Now Ather is running, as Rakshit said, like almost like a Reddit like forum, or like a community, you could call it, right? And this is not your ordinary community. I mean, just to give you some example, right, Rakshit, they're getting like 3,000 likes on a single post on the community, and almost 80 to 100 comments on like a per post basis. That's how engaged this community is. Now, personally, we run the Perspectify community, and we know the difficulties of navigating engagement, because communities are hard places to build, right? Because you need constant engagement, you need moderators, right? But to see that Ather has built such a dynamic community, to the point where Tarun Mehta and some of the other founders and the C-suite members actually hang out in the community and actively engage with customers. Now this is extremely interesting, because this allows them to follow their mantra of trying to solve every damn pain point of the consumer, right? Because you're essentially getting real-time feedback from every consumer in every region facing any kind of a problem at any showroom or anything of the sort, right? So you can continuously voice your opinion, you can engage with other members in the community, and I feel like adding on to their whole ecosystem strategy, right? You feel a sense of belongingness to this ecosystem.
Yeah.
It's not just I'm just owning like a Suzuki Access, and like, okay, 2 years later I don't really care about it, right? They're actually building for the long term, right? Like once I'm in the Ather community, it should become so hard for me to get out of that community and go back to like I can't do that. If you really think about it, you can't go from such a massive community, right? Like proper engagement, continuous updates, the founders directly getting feedback. Go back to like a Suzuki Access. You can't do that, right? And it's impossible.
And also, it's not just getting product feature updates or advertisements and all of those things. So Ather has these community events which happen, I think, once a year or twice a year, where they essentially go to every city and they are basically, interacting with the community members. What's interesting, what we realized was that, Ather community members, like if I become an Ather scooter owner, I can actually hang out with people in my area, go for chai with them, and that just makes the experience of owning that scooter so much beyond, just so much beyond than just owning a hardware device, to actually talking to actually meeting people. So this is a perfect company, which is sort of which makes no sense of why you would do this, right? But if you really think about it, you really think, why hasn't every other company solved for this, right? And with the belongingness comes, as you said, network effects, and people just being your word of mouth basically goes up through the roof, right? Because you can just invite people to the events, or just tell people that, oh, I went for chai with random people who own an Ather scooter.
Yeah, which is unheard of, right? You don't hear that very often for like owning like a two-wheeler.
Yeah.
Right, and it just kind of speaks so much about how customer centric this company is sort of running its operations.
Yeah.
So
So fundamentally, if we break down Ather's strategy, it's simple: build a good product, build a good community around that product, and just keep on solving that community's problem through your product.
with that said, that's a wrap on today's episode of Perspectify. If you like this episode, make sure you drop a like and subscribe to our podcast. And with that said, we'll catch you later. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Yeah, we're on a quest, unlocking strategies, find out what's the best. Perspectify, join us on the ride, discovering the secrets, changing the tide.